you're regular to Overdrive, you might remember this setting. This beautiful road in Dehradun might look familiar to you. We shot the Triumph Trident 660 at this very spot. In fact, that exhaust, that tail section might remind you of the Trident because, again, it is very familiar, it is very similar to that motorcycle. And if you do remember all of this, you might also recall my review of the Triumph Trident 660 where I said this.
Adventure variant on this particular platform is likely in the works, that is what we hear. But as of now, the Versys 650 or the Honda CB500X are your only options in this particular price bracket.
But that adventure variant, likely to be called the Triumph Tiger 660, is still some time away, mostly next year. It's another cup based on the Trident 660 of course, but it's going to have a philosophy more similar or more in line with the Tiger 900 or the Tiger 1200. But between that more off-road focused Tiger 660 and the friendly street bike in the Trident, Triumph has created this very fruity sport tourer. This is the Tiger Sport 660.
And with that sport moniker comes a sharp front fairing, a twin headlamp layout inspired by the Daytona, and a tall windscreen.
Ask any Trident or even a street triple owner and they would agree that there are times when they wish their motorcycles had better weather protection. Especially times when they hit the highway, go long distances. Of course, these are street bikes, but with the kind of performance that they have, you might want to hit the highway often. So here comes a motorcycle which has a performance that is comparable to the Trident for sure, also comparable arguably to the Street Triple 675, but with longer highway legs and better wind protection.
The windscreen is 7-step adjustable, and with a sport helmet, we didn't have much buffeting to complain about, at least at its tallest setting. But don't think of the Tiger Sport 660 to be just a Trident with a fancy fairing strapped on. There are chassis level changes too that complement the touring intent and give this motorcycle its own identity.
This motorcycle stays true to its sport moniker by giving you sharp turn-ins. That is possible with a slightly steeper rake angle that they managed over the Trident. At the same time, the wheelbase has been extended by 11 millimeters, and that essentially gives you better stability at highway speeds. Changing lanes doesn't feel like a problem at all. In fact, despite that extended wheelbase with that steeper rake, they managed to get the geometry in such a way that it still feels quite agile without compromising on the stability. The extended wheelbase also aids stability when you're throttling out with panniers, with your pillion and everything, so it just compensates for all of that quite nicely. So overall, the geometry, the overall riding dynamics of the motorcycle are actually quite good. It doesn't feel too long, it doesn't feel lethargic, it's nice and agile. At the same time, it's quite friendly as you would expect from any Trident or Street Triple derivative.
Triumph has also used long travel suspension compared to the Trident, though at the front you don't get separate function forks like we've seen on the Versys 650. But like the Kawasaki, the rear monoshock lets you remotely adjust the preload without the need of any tools.
Sure, it's not an off-road focused motorcycle, but with 150 millimeters of front suspension and rear wheel travel, it still is better equipped than the Trident when it comes to tackling bad roads, poor road conditions, potholes, etc. At the same time, it is still using the lightweight alloy wheels from the Trident, so you'll have to be careful when you're negotiating deep potholes. You can't just carry too much speed into the pothole or braking into the pothole because you might end up damaging those wheels. As for the wheels, they come shod with the lovely Michelin Pilot 5 rubber. We've loved them, but on a motorcycle like this, it also makes sense because they have a relatively longer life compared to the sportier tire sets available in the market. So that goes with the touring intent of this motorcycle. Slap on a pair of something like the Pirelli Scorpion Trail and you will be able to take this motorcycle to basic dirt trails, broken pathways, etc. without really breaking a sweat despite that fat rear tire. As far as the overall suspension setup is concerned, as far as the ride quality is concerned, with these tires you get excellent ride quality. The suspension is softer than the Trident but still a bit stiffer, so it's not something like say the CB500X or even the Tiger 900 GT. Those are the two spectrums that I'm giving you, but it is still quite a comfortable motorcycle even for long distance travel. Now to go nitpicking. Look at the exhaust canister. You can see the weld marks. I'm not too happy with that. They have put a cover on top. It should have been designed in a way that all those weld marks are completely gone. You can't see them. Right on top of that, this particular footrest stay, it's got that chrome satin kind of finish. It's going to pick up a lot of scuff marks. Not going to look good. They could have just done a black like the way they have done it for the rest of the motorcycle. I don't know why they had to create this. Looks like an eyesore to me. Speaking of scuff marks, you look at this panel, it's already starting to pick up scuff marks from my riding pants, and with anything like a leather pant or something, it's just going to get worse is what I think. So they should have thought about this a little differently, given it a different finish. Right on top of that, this particular panel, it's got inconsistent gaps, and I've seen it on all the motorcycles that we had on this particular ride. It is narrower here, it's opening up a little bit on the other side, and I don't quite like this. This also sort of makes a creaking sound under braking when you're holding the tank or grabbing the tank under braking. So this is something that I'm not too happy about. So yeah, those are the few things that I want to nitpick about on this motorcycle. The Tiger Sport continues to use the same Nissan brakes from the Trident, which isn't top drawer equipment, but this again is an entry-level sport tourer. But our experience with the Trident has told us that these brakes do feel soft initially. They feel the same on this bike as well. You'll read it in a lot of reviews, but don't necessarily make a judgment about the brakes based on that, because as time passes, the brakes become better. As they are running, they become better. The bite is better. If the bite still doesn't feel good enough for you, you could always look at aftermarket brake pads. That could be the first level of upgrade that you can look. But honestly, I haven't found the brakes to be inadequate at all. Even with a Pillion, they feel quite good, and the bite for me is quite nice and progressive. So take a pick, take your test ride. If you feel that they aren't good enough, you can always look at the upgrade, but I feel the brakes are quite good.
Speaking of the Pillion, the other change to the chassis comes in the form of a subframe that is wider for increased pillion comfort and stronger for bearing the weight of the Pillion, and a 3-piece luggage system. But the rear seat does not look large enough for 500km comfort.
I haven't sampled it, but the luggage system looks nice. Now, for example, you get integrated pannier mounts right here. That's a very good thing, because the way the design is, getting aftermarket pannier mounts is not going to be easy. Getting them to mount securely is not going to be easy. So Triumph giving this factory fit option is good. It also saves cost. Anyone who's invested in panniers will know the pannier mounts themselves are pretty expensive. So this is a welcome addition. Now, talking about the pannier system, it's a 3-box setup. You get 2 panniers on the side, you get a top box as well. The top box can take 2 full face helmets, so that's again good news. However, internationally, the panniers are color coded. So if you have a grey bike or a silver bike, you can get a grey option, you can get a blue option, a red option to match the colors. However, India gets all black options. That is to save cost and to reduce inventory. I don't have the price list with me, but these panniers do come at a cost. So you will have to set some money aside if you want these factory fit options. But at the same time, Triumph does keep running these discounts or offers during the festive seasons, and you will be able to end up getting a good deal on these panniers. Definitely grab it when it comes. As far as the accessories go, there are more than 40 accessories for this motorcycle, including a pair of auxiliary lights, which you might want to get, because these headlamps, these LEDs, they work quite well. It's a twin setup. They certainly work better than the Trident in terms of the spread, in terms of the throw. However, for touring needs, I think you might have to upgrade to something better, and those auxiliary lights could be a good option.
The other accessory that you might need is the low seat option.
The stock seat height is 835mm, which is a convenient 20mm lesser or lower than the KTM 390 Adventure, but it could still seem quite tall on paper for a lot of riders. But let me tell you that the confluence between the tank and the seat is quite narrow, so it's actually much easier than you think. I can easily get both my feet flat on the ground without a problem. But if you think it's still too tall for you, you can always choose the 810mm low seat option. But given the slim cushioning used on that low seat option, you will have to forego some of the touring comfort, which I think is still okay than using something like lowering links, which may change the geometry for the suspension, the ground clearance, etc.
Speaking of ground clearance, it is up by 12mm over the Trident, which is a welcome change for this touring motorcycle. And the narrow seat and tank confluence lets you easily stand up and ride when the situation demands it. But on a broken stretch of road, our foot peg broke off, which isn't expected from a motorcycle that has Tiger in its name. I think they should have simply called this the Trident ST.
This powertrain comes with a ride-by-wire system, which also gives you 2 riding modes, just the way we saw on the Trident. So you get a road mode and the rain mode. The rain mode obviously will dull down throttle response. It also has traction control, but you can switch off the traction control if you so need. As far as the engine goes, the tuning of the engine is very similar to that of the Trident, which means that the initial response is a bit dull, but once you get into the mid-range, it's a nice healthy mid-range. It's a nice meaty power band that you get. In fact, the torque is available, 90% of the torque is available from as low as 5000 RPM, and it's a flat torque curve. So even with the Pillion, luggage, pulling overtakes, coming out of corners, accelerating hard, none of that feels like a drag. It's actually quite an enthusiastic package.
The Tiger 660 has a fairly low power to weight ratio compared to something like the Tiger 900 GT or the 850 Sport. But if you find the bigger Tigers a bit much, the 660 could work better for you as long as stuff like this isn't what you fancy. Because this sport tourer will simply not feel as indestructible as the bigger Tigers. It's a tarmac bias motorcycle after all, and it is astonishing how peppy the engine feels and how nimble the motorcycle feels despite the 206 kilo weight. With a lot of spirited riding, we covered about 224 kilometers of mountain roads with 1 bar still to go on the fuel gauge. So even with the additional weight over the Trident, I expect the Tiger Sport to return around 18 kilometers to a litre, which should comfortably give you a 250 kilometer range with pillion and luggage from this 17-litre tank.
It's a nice motorcycle then, but is it worth the money? Short answer, no. At a price tag of 8.95 lakh rupees ex-showroom at the time of shooting this review, it is $1.5 lakh more expensive than the Trident. For a larger tank, that fairing and longer travel suspension, that I think is a lot of money. Of course, Triumph India has brought in that exhaustive accessories catalogue as well, which gives you stuff like the quick shifter, the aux lights, the luggage system, etc., which clearly sets it apart from the rivals, gives it the edge. But by the time you spec up all these things on this motorcycle, it becomes quite pricey. It's certainly not an entry-level price tag.
Furthermore, the motorcycle seems to be designed in such a way that you would have to stick to factory accessories and may not find convincing aftermarket options, meaning you have to give in to the pricing set by Triumph.
In fact, if you were to spec up this motorcycle with all these accessories, the pricing is going to be in the same zone as the ex-showroom price of the Tiger 850 Sport. Of course, that's a lot of money. But if you are a first-timer to these big sport tourers, I think the Versys 650 still gives you a lot more value for the asking price. It also gets you a better front suspension. Even the Suzuki V-Strom 650 is a cheaper motorcycle. Of course, it doesn't feel as modern, it doesn't have the kind of kit that you get on this motorcycle, but then it has a lot more scope. It is better at off-roading. This one, it has limited scope in that sense.
Choose the Tiger Sport 660 then if you want the added safety net of a traction control system and the 2 riding modes. But honestly, I had more fun riding this motorcycle with the traction control turned off.
Honestly speaking, if Triumph had launched the Tiger 660 Adventure at this particular price point, that would make a lot more sense. But this bike, I think it's only good enough for those looking for that nimble urban runabout with decent touring capabilities. But if I was out in the market with 11 lakh rupees in my pocket, I would certainly look for a well-kitted out, pre-owned Triumph Tiger 800. There are plenty of them in the market right now. Of course, they wouldn't come with a 2-year warranty the way this bike does, but they would offer a lot more motorcycle for that money, a lot more rewarding experience for that money. And a Tiger 800 pre-owned would definitely be my pick.
In fact, because none of these motorcycles match the scope of bikes like the Tiger 800, the mid-size sport tourer segment hasn't really taken off. And though Triumph believes that a well-spec'd motorcycle like the Tiger Sport 660 will be able to change that, the pricing is likely to let it down and prevent it from becoming an instant hit like the more value-for-money Trident. If you're willing to spend the money though, or if you can't handle the height, weight and the power of the bigger Tigers, the Tiger Sport 660 will serve you well with its light, agile and friendly character.